Welcome back to In Focus. Now, Blind SA has slammed President Cyril Ramaphosa for a delay in signing the Copyright Amendment Bill into law. The draft law seeks to allow blind and visually impaired people to access books and published works. The organization has since approached the Constitutional Court. They're compelling the president to comply. Blind SA's Thakani Masuka actually joins us for more. Masuka, so I beg your pardon. Thank you for joining us, sir. We certainly appreciate it. You have given the president an ultimatum. You say the draft bill went back to Parliament. The amendments that you were concerned about were factored in and it was fixed, but still the president seems to have major concerns with the final draft.
Thanks, Audrey, for the opportunity and the viewers. I really appreciate it. Indeed, Audrey, we have launched an urgent application, and this urgent application is as a result of the president failing to sign the bill, the Copyright Amendment Bill, into law within the stipulated time determined by the Constitutional Court. In 2022, the Constitutional Court ended the judgment and gave the mandate to Parliament to actually incorporate, to amend the Copyright Amendment Bill section because the 1978 Copyright Act was declared unconstitutional. It actually has a negative bearing on the right of persons with visual disabilities, particularly the right to education and the right to receive and impart information. As things stand under the arrangement of the Copyright Act, we have a difficulty of converting publications into accessible formats. And that on its own, Audrey, has a serious impact on blind and partially sighted persons. We have undergone painful experiences as persons with visual disabilities. If I can just highlight some of those painful experiences, particularly in the institutions of higher learning or tertiary education, it is often difficult for a blind person to complete his qualification on a record time because you would be begging the publishers to actually obtain a consent from them to convert a textbook or a prescribed book into an accessible format. When we make such requests, some publishers do agree, whereas some publishers don't agree that their publications should be converted into accessible formats. And then when they decline their request, they don't even give reasons that are justifiable. And so we say, yes.
And I suppose that's the sticking point for people that have their intellectual property that do not want it to be shared in certain ways, that you say is important to be inclusive to all members of the community. What sort of relief are you seeking from the courts?
No, the relief that we are seeking from the court, the bill, it must be signed into law so that, Audrey, we can have access to information. I've just given an example about the tertiary education or the situation or experiences that we go through when we study our university qualifications. But it goes a long way to a general access to information. Remember, with regard to the state capture reports and everything, there are different and many authors who have published books, but we can't have access to that information. We must rely on what the media is telling us, whereas we have the right to receive and impart information. But because the publication cannot be allowed to be converted into accessible formats, so we can't access the information. and it infringes directly on our right to receive information, which is very painful. 30 years down the line, we cannot be experiencing a situation of this nature wherein an individual or a president who is a custodian of ensuring that all rights enshrined in the Constitution must apply to all. It never said they must apply to few, never said that the minority must be at disadvantage. So what we are witnessing in this instance is that we as the blind community, because we are in a minority, we feel being disadvantaged. We feel that this delay of signing the bill into law is infringing on our right in many different ways, which cannot be accepted in the current democratic dispensation, Audrey.
Obviously, millions of people in your community are affected by the non-signing of this bill. I want to bring it back home a bit closer to you, your life story, how you've managed to achieve what you have in terms of your studies. What challenges have you faced and how have you overcome it? What support have you received, not only from the community, but perhaps from your family and friends as well?
I receive a lot of support, Audrey. But at some point, remember, though you receive support from different parties, be families, be friends, but the challenge would be their hands will always be tied on the basis that they also cannot break the law. They also cannot break the Copyright Act. So the best that they can do is to read the publications for you. But to a certain extent, because at some point you will be having friends and family members who will be enrolled in their qualifications. So the time that they will utilize to support you will be limited to a certain extent. And at some point, as I've made an example by the university qualifications, is that lecturers would be giving you a study guides. And study guides have limited information. But in order to have full intellect of what is required of you to produce in the exam, you need a prescribed book which encapsulates a loaded information and which will capacitate you intellectually beyond what you would have produced in the examination, Audrey.
Could you give us an overview, Mr. Masuka, of roughly how many people are affected by this act not becoming, this bill, I beg your pardon, not becoming an act, and how it would essentially change their lives if it were to be assented by the president?
Firstly, the blind community is the first stakeholder that is being affected. We have actors that are being affected as well. And there are a number of actors who are supporting us in this case because for many a times they would be paid once off and the rest, the royalties go somewhere else. But if this bill is signed into law, they will benefit because directly they will be receiving their royalties without any impediment or not having to undergo a long logistical process. One other thing in the blind community, students who will be continuously enrolling with various institutions of higher learning, they will now be able to complete their qualifications on record time. Because one other thing that is very painful is that at some point you will be submitting your assignments after the due dates, which impact negatively on your year mark. So the transformation that this signing of the bill into law will bring in our community is that they will be able to receive their publications, their study materials on time, and by so receiving their study materials on time, they then will be able to complete what is required of them on time. And whenever, as the community generally, when we have to access information of different publishers, to be informed of the current affairs, to be informed of the history of this country, we will not have to rely on the consent that we need to obtain from the publishers, but we'll just have to purchase a publication and convert them into accessible formats and read such publications by ourselves. So that is the great transformation that we will sense in our community and also in the community of artists.
Do you have any insight as to what are best known international practices when it comes to circumventing some of the constitutional issues of copyright laws? How is it done in the international community? Have you been able to learn anything from that? Are we able to learn anything from that as a country to ensure that we also have the same standards?
You know, as we speak currently, the copyright legislation in USA has a section where it favors persons with visual disabilities or blind and partially sighted persons. It does not infringe on the right of persons with visual disabilities to have access to information. And one other thing that I want to draw your attention to, Audrey, is that we have the Marrakesh Treaty, which was put in 2013. So we, as South Africa, we have not yet ratified that treaty because of this current challenge that we are experiencing of not signing this bill into law. Ratifying the Marrakesh Treaty will assist our community in a sense that will then be able to have access to a publication across or beyond the borders. So in other countries, Audrey, they take persons with visual disability or generally persons with disability to account. They have a great respect to their right to access information and their right to education. So there is no a big deal with regard to how they protect their right to have access to information in other countries, as I have alluded to the copyright arrangement in USA.
I'm actually quite happy that you brought about the Marrakesh Treaty, because I actually came across it as I was preparing for our conversation and finding out that South Africa hasn't ratified it, as you have just explained, and that this treaty actually managed to establish a set of limitations and exceptions to the traditional copyright law. I mean, that is quite exceptional to be able to make sure that, you know, the marginalized community is also included in things that we take for granted, such as having access to information.
Yes. Yeah, you see, one other thing, Audrey, when the Constitutional Court handed down the judgment in 2022, it crafted an exemption to blind and partially sighted persons to Copyright Act under the current arrangement for blind and partially sighted people to have access to information, to actually convert the publications to accessible formats without obtaining a consent from the publishers. But now that the period stipulated by the court has elapsed on 21 September 2024, we are back to square one. So we are out of that legislation, we are out of that exemption. If we continue to convert publications into accessible formats, we are rendered to a criminal act. So we'll now be taken as criminals. Hence, this application is urgent. We want the president to listen to us. And the worrying thing, Audrey, is that we have not been summoned, or let me say, being invited by the president as an important stakeholder representing the blind community, just for the president to listen to us. to listen where are we coming from to advocate that this bill must be signed into law. Hence, we would be writing letters to the office of the president without getting tangible responses, without getting a word from the president on what he is actually saying about the signing of this bill into law. And I'm very much concerned, Audrey, about the legal team of the president in advising the president on this matter. Because if the legal team of the president was correctly advising the president, it would have warned the president about the period laid by the Constitutional Court before the 21st of September 2024. Because the parliament has already done its work on the 29th of February of approving the changes of the Copyright Amendment Bill. So this law or this bill has been sitting in the desk of the president now for 7 months, which is very much unfair, without any tangible communique from the office of the president. So it's something which we say it is a very unacceptable situation and it cannot be condoned in a democratic dispensation.
Your legal representation is Section 27. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. Who are some of your allies as you embark on this court bid, this legal bid to challenge the president to sign this bill into law? Do you have other organizations that perhaps are friends of the court or that want to join you to ensure that you get on the other side and this bill is signed?
There's a South African, you'll correct me, South African Guild of Actors wants to apply, is very much supportive of us. They want to apply to be a friend of court. So we have many stakeholders that are supporting us, though they are not doing it in a form of wanting to become a friend of court. So we have a support, but the challenge is that some record companies are not in favor of the signing of this bill into law because they are misguided. So our support is in majority. So we are very much comfortable of the support that we are getting, despite the opposition that we are witnessing from some of the record companies.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Mr. Masuka, thank you so much for speaking to us. He is from Blind SA, and they want to compel the Constitutional Court to make the president sign the bill that allows them to have copy of some of the information that they're not able to access in form of a braille. We'll have to leave that conversation there.